Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. If wishes were horses, beggars would ride. If the amount of boasting by Zimbabwe's the Zanu PF government were to become true, Zimbabwe would be one of the richest countries in the world. But alas, it is one of the poorest countries in the world. Because all we get from our Zanu PF ruling elite is boasting and more boasting. Absolutely meaningless. This is President Emerson Mnangagwa in Dakar. There's a summit there. And
Standing success story.
Thank you very much. In Zimbabwe, we have adopted basic philosophy, which is village philosophy. One, we say a country must be ruled by the people of that country. Two, a country must be developed by the people of that country. Three, a country must eat what it kills. That is village wisdom. Now, in Zimbabwe, we have problems of food insecurity, and we said, how much food do we want per year to feed our country? We know we need about 2 million metric tons of grain. So we say, because there is climate change, how many hectares of land can we put under irrigation to produce the 2 million plus metric tons to feed the nation? And we determine how much yield does a hectare have. Once you've done that, you now know how many hectares you must put under irrigation to achieve the amount of grain you want to feed your nation in spite of climate change. That we have done, and we are now food secure. Secondly, we have been importing our wheat from Ukraine, our fertilizer from Russia. Now that side is problematic. So we decided to say we need about 240,000 metric tons of wheat. So how many hectares do we want under irrigation to grow wheat? And we calculated and put that number of hectares under wheat. We are now wheat sufficient. And we believe that next season we should be able to export wheat. We got the fertilizer which we're getting from Russia. We decided to find out what makes fertilizer. We discovered that because of the colonial mentality, we thought fertilizer was produced elsewhere. We have the materials in the country, and 3-4 months ago, we've begun producing our own fertilizer.
I'll just concentrate on the third point, the farming. Those of you who are familiar with Zimbabwe's history would know that Zimbabwe used to be the breadbasket of the region before independence and for the first 10 years or so after independence. Then things changed. In 2000, the Mugabe regime started what they call the land redistribution. They seized mostly commercially owned white farms, and they were given to Zanu PF ruling elite and their cronies, mostly. And instead of putting them to full use, they failed to do so. And so the country's agricultural sector collapsed. For the last 20 years or so, Zimbabwe has been importing food aid every 2 or 3 years. Of course, throughout that period, the regime claimed that it was retooling the agricultural sector, and so was giving very generous loans to farmers. And needless to say, most of those farmers were the ruling elite. They took the money, but agricultural production did not increase. And this has become the reality in Zimbabwe, where the agriculture collapsed because the ruling elite took the farms. And then the ruling elite has been pumping millions of dollars every year into the sector, supposedly to revive it, only to find that the ruling elite saw it as another way, a conduit from which to loot public funds without the economy ever, without the agricultural sector ever reviving. Ever since Mnangagwa took over from Mugabe in 2017 following the military coup, he has been running this command agriculture in which the budget is allocated every year, multi-million dollar budget. And in most cases, it has been controlled by the president. And he has dispersed the monies allocated in command agriculture. Some of that money has been looted, using it to buy cars, Porsche cars, instead of food production. So the agricultural sector has never revived. And yet, year upon year, the country has poured in millions of dollars into the sector. He is now admitting that Zimbabwe has been importing wheat, maize, and other foods. And now we are being told from next year, this will not happen. Zimbabwe will now produce enough wheat to meet its own requirements and to have enough surplus for export. This is just a mirage. Zimbabwe's economy has been on a downward trend ever since the country's independence in 1980. And for the first decade after independence, Mugabe never tired of talking of mass prosperity. Kusaro Shinji. In reality, all the nation ever got was mass poverty. Zimbabwe is one of the poorest countries in Africa. And at the present moment, although we hear time and time again that things are improving, ever since Mnangagwa took over power, he was just been talking of this vision 2030, which is now only 6 years away, in which Zimbabwe will become an upper middle income nation. Of course, that's nonsense. How do you become an upper middle income nation when the economy is in such a sorry state that at the present moment, unemployment has been 80% plus for the last 15 years or more. And since he took over, it's not improved. Inflation is now sitting at 1,600% plus. Those are not the signs of an economy recovering. Those are the signs of an economy in meltdown. And yet we are continuously informed that we will meet this vision 2030. Most of our infrastructure have collapsed. Our roads are in a sorry state. Hospitals, schools, after decades of being starved of funding, they're in a sorry state. How do you expect the economy to revive and thrive under those conditions? It's nonsense. Of course, it's nonsense. This promise that Zimbabwe will be exporting wheat next year. All those who are interested in placing their orders, you can go ahead now. It's all nonsense. As long as Zimbabwe remains a pariah state, governed by corrupt, incompetent, and murderous thugs who have managed to stay in power only because they rigged elections, Zimbabwe will never have any meaningful economic recovery, let alone thrive. All these projects and the equipment to irrigate the farms so that we produce enough wheat year on year, it's just wishful thinking. The money will be allocated and the money will disappear. Those who get it will use it for something else. Instead of investing in agricultural equipment and so forth, they'll buy cars and other luxuries. It will never be accounted for. It's never been accounted for in the past. So that has not changed. The regime will come up with an excuse why it failed to deliver. At the beginning of his speech, Mnangagwa talked of the country must be ruled by the people. That has become a totally meaningless slogan because Mnangagwa rigged the 2023 elections. The ordinary Zimbabweans were denied a meaningful vote. Even the regional body, SADC, the continental body, AU, selection observers, condemned last year's elections as flawed and illegal. So the claim that that Zimbabwe is being ruled by Zimbabweans is totally nonsensical. Zanu PF is ruling, but without the people. It's mandate. And as long as Zimbabwe remains a pariah state, there will be no meaningful economic recovery. And all these promises of prosperity are nothing more than just another mirage. The question is, how long are we going to allow ourselves to chase mirage, one mirage after another? Country will be celebrating its independence in a few weeks. And it is most disheartening, we have to admit, that after 44 years of independence, Zimbabwe is still not in a position to hold free, fair, and credible elections. And as long as we have rigged elections, Zanu PF will remain in power. People like Mnangagwa will go all over the world boasting about what they have achieved. It's all smokes and mirrors. Here is an individual who is destroying Zimbabwe, and yet claims that he's doing Zimbabwe a great favor. Zimbabwe is developing. Zimbabwe will become one of the richest countries, well, an upper middle income nation by 2030. That from next year, Zimbabwe will have regained its status as the breadbasket, at least in wheat production, of the region. Those are just empty promises. Those are just empty promises. He's talking of he has got all the dams and the irrigation equipment. Yes, we've got the land. And we know that the land is fertile. But we lack the leadership. Ever since Zimbabwe's independence 44 years ago, the country has not built an additional power generation capacity. Last year, we finally commissioned Unit 7 and 8 at Wanke Power Station. But those are coming in very late, when the 6 units that were there already have become totally unreliable. And as for the other old thermal power stations, most of those should have been decommissioned a long time ago. And this is why the country has been having load shedding for decades now. To build a generating plant, we should be building one at Batoka Gorge. But to build it, commission it, equip it and commission it and put it back on stream takes years. 3 or 4 years at the very least. And yet we are being told here that next year Zimbabwe will be producing enough wheat. It will have the land, all the equipment to do all the irrigation and produce enough wheat. It's just, here is an individual who lives in his own world. And these claims have got absolutely nothing to do with the reality on the ground. The number one issue that people must focus on, Zimbabweans must focus on, is the issue of holding free, fair, and credible elections. Until we cure ourselves of the curse of rigged elections, and bad governance, Zimbabwe is going nowhere. People like Mnangagwa will be keeping on setting mirages, making promises of economic prosperity, but always a year or a few years ahead. And as we get to that target, it'll be moved another year, another few years. That is what a mirage is all about. You'll never get there. When you get there, when you think, oh, okay, it seems to be always moving ahead of you. Zimbabwe is not going to be exporting wheat or any other grain in any way near what it used to do before Zanu PF seized the farms. That is the truth. And the people of Zimbabwe have got to start looking at this problem and start addressing it. Because without implementing the reforms to ensure free, fair, and credible elections, we will always be challenged. And meanwhile, the economy will continue to sink deeper and deeper into the abyss. And the longer we stay in this mess, the harder it's going to be to revive the economy. I think to get the country back to what it was in 1980, even with the most competent government, it will take at least 10 years to just get where we were at the time of independence. And that is very conservative. Because getting there is not going to be easy when you have destroyed so much. Even the people themselves, the quality of education that the nation has been producing leaves a lot to be desired. Because most professionals have left the teaching profession in search of better jobs. Getting them back to Zimbabwe will not be happen overnight. And training those who are there will also not happen overnight. It's a pity that we really have not taken the problem of good governance with the earnest and agency the matter demands. And this is why we are in this mess in Zimbabwe. But until we do, Zimbabwe is going nowhere. That is what I can tell you now. We'll forever be chasing mirages. That is the truth. Thank you very much for listening, and good night.